Yeah, this is the run-up to the I know you'd rather see this. I'm sitting here at Just Pirates Cove, getting ready to launch the voter initiative process in just a few minutes. As you can see, it's a lovely afternoon, and I know there won't be a lot of people down here just because this is too controversial for most people. And I understand that. A lot of people are very concerned over the fact that their family members work for government of Guam, or their businesses have contracts with government of Guam. So I'm not surprised that there weren't many people. In fact, there weren't any people at the show this morning at Adelup at 10 o'clock other than me and Officer Ozama from the Governor's Protection Detail, I gather. But in the meantime, let's go.
So the BPT of 5%, do you think that can already be brought back to?
I have made my
4%?
position about that, and I have said that I don't want it rolled back. I'd like to see what fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2021 gives, because as a result of what has happened, we were able to actually also close the gap as a result of President Trump's Jobs Act legislation that took away about $68 million from our general fund. So those are the kinds of things that I am really looking at, Heidi, before, and I, like I have said, I have spoken to many business leaders also, and they are okay with the 5%.
Will that be? Will that stay at least until fiscal year 2021? So 2022, there might be a
I would like
consideration.
for it to stay, and I'd like for it to stay forever.
Might be a
I would like
consideration.
for it to stay, and I'd like for it to stay forever.
Might be a
I would like
consideration.
for it to stay, and I'd like for it to stay forever. If we start collecting more, and if we have other new sources of revenue to make up for that, then yeah, that's something that we can look at.
Forever. 5%.
That's what I would like, yeah.
I'm Ken Leon-Guerrero, and I am broadcasting live the community education meeting from Jeff's Pirates Cove. And as you can see out here, it is a beautiful day out here at Epan. I'm just sorry that I have it all to myself. It would have been nice to have others join me, but I understand. And the reason I understand is because we have a government that is very, very punitive. People are afraid of our government. And it should be the other way around. You know, the old saying from the 60s, I love my country, but I fear my government. Well, that's where we are today. We love our island, but we fear our government. And I'll tell you what. It goes back to the state of our island right now. Our island is hold on. As for those of you who are new to this, I'm still getting the hang of this new software. And here we go. There we go. State of our island. We are now 23 months into a pandemic healthcare emergency. And during this time frame, the governor has used and in many cases abused her unlimited powers granted her under the declaration of a public health care emergency. And the people are suffering. But let's take a look at the demographics on the ground. We have learned as a result of the census that we don't have as many people living here as we thought we did. The walking, talking number for many years was around 165. Now we know we have around 153. And during this pandemic, we have seen an exodus from our island. Many of the best and brightest who have transferable skills have left our island. A lot of senior citizens have liquidated assets and taken their money with them as they relocated to be closer to the children. And in the meantime, our politicians are ignoring the plight of the rest of us. And that's sad, because when we look at our situation here, we have a population that is trapped. The majority of the people work in low-wage jobs that require having 2 or 3 jobs just to cover the basics of life: food, shelter, clothing, and transportation. And when anything extraordinary happens, as we see here with this lady up in Jigo, politicians turn their backs on the people. I mean, here is a woman who somehow, through no fault of her own, and more likely than not through defective equipment at GWA, although they deny it, and yet here they are holding her ransom for $36,000. A senior citizen living on a fixed income in a one-room tin shack. And yet our politicians, while giving themselves massive pay raises and bonuses that exceed her yearly income, are demanding that she pay. And on top of that, the governor just dropped the bomb on the people of Guam when she delivered her $1 billion budget to Adelie. A $1 billion budget in face of an economy that was shut down shows that she's totally out of touch with reality. Because yes, revenues have been strong, but that's only been through the generosity of the American taxpayer that dropped billions of dollars of federal funds on our island. But those funds won't last forever. And what will the governor do then? See, right now the governor is catering to the traditional election year politics of handing out pay raises selectively, mostly to government of Guam employees, like an executive order that gave an 18% pay raise to public safety officers. Why didn't she do that last year? And now she's talking about giving teachers a pay raise. Well, why didn't she do that last year when conditions were harsher? Could it be because she wanted to do it closer to the election so that people would link their improving fortune with her generosity with American taxpayer dollars? That's the way I look at it. Because when we go back to 2019, and November 2019, I was listening about the special economic session that took place in November of 2019. During that time frame, as I was listening to all the different department heads reporting, it seemed like government of Guam was dramatically behind projections for revenue collections in almost all of the special funds as well as taxes. And in fact, it had gotten to the point where, through the actions of the administration early on and the legislature early on, they were driving Guam, government of Guam, over the financial cliff that Puerto Rico went over in 2016. And it was my prediction back then that pretty soon that we would be the second territory asking the federal government for a bailout. And then COVID arrived. And along with COVID arriving, billions of dollars of funds from the taxpayers of the United States that went into government of Guam coffers, went to support the people of Guam so that they could put food on the table and keep current on their utility bills and to a degree on their rents. And that was a lifesaver for government of Guam, because if it hadn't have been for that little situation there, okay. We're still trying to get the software to work. Stand by. Anyway, what had happened was that with billions of dollars flowing in CARES Act funding and later in FEMA funding and then later in American Rescue Plan funding, the people of Guam got financial resources, spent the money, and made the government of Guam whole-er. And that was the saving grace for government of Guam in 2020 and in 2021. And now the governor is sitting on top of nearly $1 billion of federal funds, holding it in reserve so that she can use it to help stimulate donations to her campaign. It's the only reason why she's keeping $300 million in reserve to build a new Guam Memorial Hospital at a time when her people are suffering here and now, and we need things to happen here and now. So we have some people coming up here, so I will mute the mic so that we don't have the RV. Hey, Nate.
Sure. Chauffeur service and everything.
Yeah, really. Okay, now we'll get back to the presentation. And I bring this up because a funny thing happened to the temporary business privilege tax that was only supposed to last 8 months. Remember that? It was sold to the people that this business privilege tax would increase from 4% to 5%, would only last 8 months. And at the end of 8 months, the tax would be done. But the first thing the senators did is they extended that. And as we heard in the opening, the governor now wants 5% forever. Never mind that because of this 5% tax, we've had back-to-back budget surpluses. When you take into consideration the amount of federal funds being dumped onto the island and the amount of taxes being collected, that 5% has actually provided a windfall for government of Guam. And then as soon as the federal funds run out, all the people that were employed with those federal funds and all the commitments made with those federal funds are going to find themselves up a creek without a paddle. But Joseph Augustine, the chairman of the Finance and Budget Committee, has done nothing to make good the commitments of rolling back the business privilege tax that he laid so powerfully when they signed that bill into law back in 2018. In the meantime, what we find out is we have basically moved into an animal farm type existence. And when I say an animal farm type existence, the book Animal Farm by George Orwell outlined the situation where the classes divided. And we see that here on Guam in Rule 7. All animals are created equal, but some animals are created more equal than others. Okay, let's try this again. And here we go. There we go. And that's what we're looking at today, because what we've seen here for the past decades is the politically well-connected insiders and elected officials work together to fill their pockets and build their financial security on the backs of the taxpayers and the public. How else can we explain the problem at the Chamorro Land Trust a couple of years ago, where politically well-connected insiders and administration officials were helping themselves to million-dollar view lots on top of Mecheche Hill in Barragata Heights? How else can we explain, the $10 to $20 million of uncollected tobacco taxes? And the funny thing is, if a small business owner like a friend of mine fell behind in his business privilege tax, he wasn't allowed to renew his business license till he brought his business privilege taxes current. And yet here we have the Calvo family, politically well-connected insiders to say the least, not only getting their business licenses renewed every year in spite of how much taxes they owe, they continue as business as normal, and the files are sealed, so we don't know. And the current Attorney General is not interested in prosecuting this, and the current administration is not willing to release the information. And that's not just it. I mean, we could go back decades and find examples like this, where a convicted felon, convicted on federal tax violations, serving time in a federal prison, gets multi-million-dollar contracts from Guam International Airport. Or how about the situation where the federal receiver for the landfill, he condemned some land for Lejean, had it appraised, and paid the people the appraised value of $4 million. Well, as soon as the Calvo Tenorio administration got in place, the first thing they did is have the land reappraised by solid waste, not by the receiver's office, but by Guam Solid Waste. And they appraised it at $35 million, and so the taxpayers of Guam ended up paying another $31 million on top of the $4 million originally paid. And then we have audits that show the government of Guam is delinquent in collecting about $40 million in property taxes. And the reason I bring this up is because we know it's going to cost about $100 million to renovate all the schools on the island and bring them up to code and state of the art. Well, you take $35 million that was given to the people holding the land underneath Lejean, and you take $16 million that hasn't been paid by the cigarette company, and add another $10 million from the uncollected property taxes. That's over 50% of the money needed to bring all of our schools up to state-of-the-art spec. And here's another example of politically well-connected insiders helping themselves at our expense. Remember Simon Sanchez? Remember the contract that Simon Sanchez to renovate and build the school. Cortec won the bid, but the government of Guam went ahead and awarded the bid to a less than year-old mixed martial arts promotion company that promoted cage fighting in Manila, and somehow they qualified to get a $100 million contract. Only in the discovery process we found out that it was going to be somewhere around $160 million for a smaller building than Cortec was proposing. That's gaming the system. That's how politically well-connected insiders go in using the power of their positions and offices and help themselves and their well-connected insiders to public assets, land, and monies. Here's another one. Manhita Farms. Another politically well-connected insider family almost got 50 acres of Chamorro Land Trust land for nothing, for 100 years, with the rights to subdivide and sublease the property. Now remember, they're not paying anything to Chamorro Land Trust under this law had it passed, and they would have had the rights to develop 50 acres of land, less than a mile from Anderson Main Gate and less than a mile from the new Marine camp. Camp Blas, I think it's called. Camp General Blas, well anyway, less than 2 miles from either camp. That land would have been worth 20, 50, maybe even $60 million when it was developed out, and all the very expensive luxury units sold or rented to military officers. And the beneficiaries of the Chamorro Land Trust would have received nothing from it. And let's not forget one of my favorites, Guam YTK. Here was a company that did nothing, didn't build what they promised to build, never paid any lease rent, and yet they were awarded nearly $20 million. Well, by the time you add interest in and attorney's fees, somewhere between 15 and $20 million of taxpayer funds. They even got a lien against the bank accounts for the Guam Port Authority. Thank God that people stood up, because the governor didn't stand up. And I'm not surprised Governor Calvo didn't stand up, because it was a member of his family or a relative of his that was running Guam YTK. And then there was Guam Resource Recovery Partners, another example of a bad example. Here we had a group of people that never designed or built or operated a waste energy plant, issuing a private activity bond guaranteed by the taxpayers of Guam with liens on the business privilege taxes. And we're going to give 160 million taxpayer guaranteed dollars to a company that never designed or built a waste energy plant. Thank God that one's finally gone away. And then we discovered lately that there's all kinds of fraud in the tax and property tax collections. And this really scares me, because now we, at a point in time where the one of these days I'm going to have to get myself a technical director to run this for me, so that the presentations will go smoother and I won't be as distracted as I am by come on. Yeah, see the view out here. This is what I'm having to deal with while I do this presentation. I know you feel my pain. Anyway, where was I? Yes, we were back at property taxes and fraud in the collection of property taxes, and the government of Guam can't even collect property taxes. That's a real big problem. We're sitting here at a time when most people are struggling to stay in their homes, and the governor wants to go and raise the property taxes, making it even more difficult for people trapped in low-wage service sector jobs. If they have jobs, remember, our economy's been shut down, and about 95% of our tourism industry will not be coming back anytime soon. So it goes back to, remember what I said in the beginning about this being Rule 7 situation. All animals are created equal. Some animals are created more equal than others. We see that with the never-ending public health care emergencies, which has given the governor the excuse to release 27 pages of sole source contracts, all of which went to politically well-connected insiders that probably inflated prices when you take a look at it. And that's why the public health system, the public health care emergencies will continue until, I'm predicting, they will end the first week of November. And why, you ask, the first week of November? Well, it just so happens the first week of November is election time. So until then, the governor's going to keep those things flying. But in the meantime, you know, we have Senator Paris declaring that she is going to go out there and drill down on these 27 pages, because I haven't heard anything about it. And let us not forget that during the first days of this administration, they gave all of their politically well-connected insiders, directors, deputy directors, exempt employees, massive pay raises. At least they didn't make them retroactive, but then again, they'd only been in office for a couple of weeks, so it would have been hard to make them retroactive. And remember, one of the first bills they passed was Bill 30. Corporate welfare for Guam Regional Medical Center that destroyed the financial security of Guam Memorial Hospital, costing taxpayers tens of millions of dollars. But hey, the insiders are happy. So what have politicians done for us? What have they done to make us healthier and smarter and safer? Well, a group of senators wanted to lower the age of sexual consent to 12 years old. I can't imagine for the life of me who went to these senators and demanded that you enact legislation to lower the age of sexual consent to 12 years old. And don't forget, they also, during the height of the pandemic, they banned the plastic bag. They saved us from plastic shopping bags. Now, if this had been a well thought out bill, they would have, I mean, this blows my mind about this bill, because they're claiming that the intent was to here we go, we're going to do that little split screen again. Yeah, so their claim was that this whole purpose of this bill was to prevent the landfill from filling. But you know what we put in the landfill? Trash in plastic bags. And what is in that trash, those plastic trash bags that are still legal, even though the plastic shopping bags are illegal. The plastic trash bags are full of the plastic that we had to bring home in our recyclable shopping bags that we have to buy. See, before we didn't have to buy the retail shopping bags, but we have to buy the plastic bags to take our groceries home. And then we throw away all the trash the plastic trash from our shopping into a plastic bag and throw that into the landfill. But hey, fear not, for Senator Paris is going to save us from the brown paper shopping bag. Banning the plastic shopping bag wasn't enough. Now she's going after the brown bag. And then on top of that, senators also, during the height of this pandemic, renamed the southern villages. Now think about the absurdity of that. We had nearly 40,000 people out of work. We had thousands of people spending the night in their cars hoping to get food at the distribution points before they ran out. And this was a high priority for this group of senators. For me, the priority would have been this. You see, I went for a walk in Dedido the other day, and this is what I ran into. I literally had to walk for my life to get away from this pack of dogs right here. You would think that this would have been a higher priority than renaming the southern villages, because so many people I know are afraid to let their children walk to school or walk to the bus stops. Or we see people who refuse to walk in the villages because they're afraid. Well, oh, pardon me.
Ken,
Yeah,
you want us to do anything?
not at the moment.
Okay, we're leaving.
Oh, okay.
Well, I am.
All right.
You hanging?
Okay. Now the senators have overridden the efforts by some politicians to terminate
Nate, how come you always...
the
That lady told me your name was... That was confusing, right?
the. Hold on, let's wait till the ATV leaves. Once again, the unpredictability of live podcasting. Anyway, the senators had a chance to stand up for the people twice this session. One of the first bills introduced into the 36th legislature was actually a good bill. It was a bill that curbed the Emergency Powers Act, giving the governor the authority to call a 90-day emergency and act within that 90 days. But after 90 days, she was going to have to justify that extension of the emergency before the legislature. That's a good bill. One that would have prevented all the abuses that we're seeing take place now. But the Lucrats in the legislature stood with the administration and stood against the people of Guam. And as a result, we have now seen an endless stream of pork barrel bills being passed in the legislature, and we've seen very little done in the legislature that benefits the people of Guam. So that brings us to why we need to do a voter initiative. And the reason we need to do a voter initiative is because we cannot count on the politicians to do the things that they promised that they would do on the campaign trail. And those who, yep, here we go again. I appreciate your patience with this, because this is really important stuff that we're talking about right here. And these are things that the politicians hope that you forget. All right, we'll just go to the all right, the split screen is not working. So we'll just go back to the screen and talk about the initiatives. You see, George Sotomayor said, "Those who forget the past, the lessons learned in the lessons of the past, are doomed to repeat them." And that's what we see happening time and time again here on Guam, as politicians conveniently promise and say anything they can to get elected, but as soon as they get elected, they forget. So that's why we need to do a voter initiative. The first initiative is to eliminate the primary election. A lot of people I talked to in 2020, a lot of the people I've been trying to talk into running in 2022 would have rather run for office as an independent instead of declaring party politicians. And the reason for that is, in order to get into the legislature, you have to run for office. And the primary election is the major gate that politicians use to sort out who gets to play and who doesn't. So we're basically sorting out teams. You're either a red team or blue team. And here on Guam, there is no difference between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. other than the color of the shirt they wear. Because if you were to look at the actions of the Republican legislature when they were in power and look at the actions of the Democrat legislature when they were in power, there is no difference. You don't see any true adherence to Republican or Democrat ideals. So eliminating the primary election opens up the candidate pool. It makes it easier for new faces to get into the election, get into the legislature and into government office. The second initiative is to go to a part-time legislature. For many years, Guam's legislature was a part-time legislature, and a part-time legislature makes it possible for the best and brightest in our communities to serve our island. But a lot of the best and brightest can't leave their businesses for extended time or take time out from their career. So what we end up with is mostly politically well-connected insiders looking for a full-time job. And if you listen to the testimony of senators and former senators back when bills were introduced to roll back the senators' pay from $85,000 to $55,000, you would have heard for yourself that these guys were in it only for the money. The third initiative is 21 senators, going back to 21 senators. Right now we have too much power concentrated into too few hands. And that doesn't work for the benefit of the people of Guam, because now the way the legislature is structured, it's possible to pass a bill with 4 votes. That is not in the best interest of the people of Guam. So the next initiative is a very important one. It's called the Corrupt Practices Act. Because right now, I am in the Supreme Court of Guam. I filed a lawsuit against the Department of Administration over the Guam Regional Medical Center Corporate Welfare Bill. I knew it was wrong. Federal court ruled it was wrong, but I'm still in court because the governor's administration and the Attorney General are trying to make it impossible for taxpayers to hold the governor accountable. And here we go.
The Supreme Court is now in session. The Honorable Robert J. Torres, Associate Justice presiding.
Would the clerk please call the case?
This is Supreme Court case number CVA 20-008, Joaquin v. Leon-Guerrero, individually and as a taxpayer, plaintiff appellant versus Government of Guam, Department of Administration, and Edward Byrne in his capacity as director, defendants appellants. Appearing for the plaintiff appellant is attorney Braddock J. Huseman. Appearing for the defendants appellees is attorney Jordan Lawrence Paloon. The panel consists of Associate Justice Robert J. Torres, Associate Justice Catherine A. Merriman, and Justice Pro Tem John A. Manglona. Attorney Huseman reserves 10 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Attorney Huseman, you may proceed.
Good morning, Your Honors. My name is Braddock J. Huseman. I represent Mr. Leon-Guerrero. May it please the court. This case began as a simple taxpayer case and has changed into something quite different. Now it is a case that involves this court's jurisdiction, standing, and even the separation of powers. The Superior Court of Guam dismissed Mr. Leon-Guerrero's taxpayer suit because he lacked a sufficiently concrete injury to satisfy the injury requirements found in the Article 3 of the United States Constitution. The Superior Court came to that decision because of this court's opinion in what the briefing papers refer to as the airport case, In re AB Wonpat International Airport Authority, a 2-year-old case. The Superior Court interpreted a few paragraphs of dicta within the airport case to conclude that in all cases in Guam, courts require a federal Article 3 standing analysis, particularly as it pertains to injuries. The Superior Court's interpretation, however, is incorrect. The U.S. Constitution does not mandate Article 3 requirements on the island of Guam, and neither does the Organic Act. In fact, the requirement of an Article 3 injury in fact upends literally decades of case law on Guam. Worse, the requirement of an Article 3 injury in fact in all cases as an irreducible minimum jeopardizes a host of Guam statutes, as well as this court's own original jurisdiction and several opinions rendered thereunder.